I haven't called you up yet. Okay, I just wanted. That's good. That's good. There you. We won't do. You want to do the pledge too? What's the honor? Oh, no, wait. I don't want to. Would you like to do the pledge? No, now you like. You don't serve. Good evening. Welcome to the Chandler Planning and Zoning Commission hearing for June 16th. First item is roll call, please.
Chairman Human,
Here.
Vice Chair Rose,
Here.
Commissioner Kimball,
Here.
Commissioner Albuquerque,
Here.
Commissioner Peacock,
Here.
Commissioner Flanders.
Here.
We have quorum.
Thank you very much. Okay, first item on the agenda is Pledge of Allegiance, led by Commissioner Peacock.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate that. So, next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes for the study session of June 2nd and the regular meeting of June 2nd. Do I have any discussion, any changes, comments on those minutes? Otherwise, I'll take a motion to approve the minutes. Do I have a motion? Through the chair.
I'll make a motion through the chair.
Okay,
I'll make a
Commissioner
motion
Kimball.
to approve the study session minutes of Wednesday, June 2nd, 2021, and the regular meeting minutes of Wednesday, June 2nd, 2021.
Okay, do I have a second? Second. Okay. Is that for Mr. Flanders? Okay, Commissioner Flanders seconded it. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. So staff, item A, we're going to do a full presentation on that. The audience, we had a study session prior to this meeting, and there are two items. Item B, which is a continuance to the July 21st meeting, and then item C, the Oasis. I do have a speaker card, but it says only if necessary. Mr. Blue, this item is on consent. I don't think there's any issues or anything. So, but if you'd like to speak, you're good. Okay, thank you. Okay. Any additional stipulations that would be read into the record, staff, on on that item? I don't think so, right? Okay. All right. I'll just make a comment on the record on item C, which I think is a really good project for that neighborhood. There was some concerns brought up during the study session about parking. This is a 2-year use permit for this particular use. So I just make sure the applicant understands that this will have to come back in 2 years, and that parking is a concern based on 25 parking spaces for that size of a project. So, but I think it's a great addition to the neighborhood. Any other comments on any of the consent items? Otherwise, I'll get them. Oh, whoops, sorry, before I go for a motion. Is there anybody in the audience on items that I just talked about, item B, which is a continuance, item C, that would like to comment on them? Okay, make sure I do that first. Okay. If none, then Commission, do I have a motion on the consent agenda?
Motion to approve consent agenda items B and C.
Okay, I have a motion on the floor. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Flanders. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, item A. Staff, if you want to start this off.
Sure. And Chair, you'd like me to run through the entire presentation?
You can do a brief presentation and some of the questions that maybe came up during the study session as well, and then we'll let the applicant, he's anxious to make a full presentation, so.
About 40 minutes of presentation.
Cool. Cool.
All right, well, thank you, Chair. Again, item A is Schrader Farms Business Park, PLH 200030, PLT 200020. And this is a request to rezone, a request for a preliminary development plan, as well as for mid-rise overlay and preliminary plat for the property shown here, which is just over 70 acres in area located at the northwest corner of McQueen Road and Queen Creek Road. Here you can see the request broken down. A rezoning to PAD is requested for the blue outlined area, along with the PDP and mid-rise overlay. Currently, where the future development is called out, only a request to rezone to PAD is being proposed. Business park land uses, including office, showroom, and I-1 industrial land uses, are proposed for the 67 approximate net acre site for the business park, and for the 3.5 net acre commercial corner, C2 community commercial land uses are proposed, excluding auto-related uses such as gas stations, oil changes, and there is a stipulation that allows up to one drive-through land use on that site. The business park site layout shows 6 single-story buildings ranging in size from 91,000 square feet to over 270,000 square feet. They are proposed to be over 46 feet in height. The loading courts are located at the interior of the site, and the customer and employee parking is located at the perimeter of the site. The applicant has proposed a variety of landscaped setbacks located along the perimeter and in front of the buildings to provide diverse landscaping to help break up those buildings and diminish their mass. Also shown here, the applicant is proposing main site entrances to be enhanced through the use of stained concrete and enhanced landscaping, including date palms. Those enhanced entrances are proposed at Canary, McQueen, and Queen Creek Road. And I'll let the applicant further explain details on landscaping, more so pertaining to the building facade landscaping that was inquired about by Commission. A lot of attention was paid to screening. In red, you see the walls are called out that will screen the loading docks. In green, the transparent wrought iron style fences are proposed. And along the front, you see intermittent parking screen walls where berming and extensive landscaping alone will not screen the parking. Here are elevation details of these walls and the berming. And hopping into the architecture, the applicant is proposing concrete for the primary building material. Here you can see that they're using Formliner to provide a texture to that concrete, as well as a composite tile on the first floor. Deep metal awnings and canopies are proposed to accent windows and call out entrances. The elevation shows this line weight a little bit more in detail. And submitted in the addendum memo, the applicant provided a schematic showing the landscaping in front of the building and how they're proposing larger canopy trees to help break up that facade and smaller ornamental trees near the entrances. Also, to enhance the entrances, they're proposing to use textured concrete as well as seating areas. And again, we went over the neighborhood outreach. Initially, the applicant was required to host 2 meetings. The initial meeting had 23 neighbors attend, where you see the exhibit that was proposed or presented at that meeting. The neighbors had concerns for traffic, the crosstalks, distribution, and just questions about the commercial corner. The applicant took that input quite seriously and substantially changed the site layout. As a result of that, we haven't had neighborhood calls or emails in opposition or with further questions or concerns about this project after they substantially revised that site layout. As I went over, this proposal does align with our general plan's recommendations for employment, as well as the Chandler Air Park area recommendations for light industrial land uses and neighborhood commercial. So as part of that, and because Airport Commission also determined there is no conflict with airport operations, staff is recommending approval of the request with the additional 2 stipulations that are included in the addendum memo that was presented in front of you earlier today. I will allow the applicant to go over the further questions that you had asked regarding landscaping and land use, if that's all right.
Any questions for Christine? Okay, we will go to the applicant.
Good evening, Chair, members of the Commission. Brennan Ray, 1850 North Central, here on behalf of the applicant, Core 5. Excited to bring the Schrader Farms Business Park to you. It has been a development that we've been working on for about the past 2 years. No thanks to a little small delay in part of COVID that threw a monkey wrench into things, but we've been working close with staff on this for a while. We've are mindful when we approach this site and developing it with a business park of concerns in the area that may have lingered in the air relative to prior zoning cases and approvals down the road. And so we were very cognizant and worked with staff to ensure that we had a development that we could proudly stand before you and say is a good thing for the area and is something that is appropriate. Just as a reminder, and I know we're not going to talk about it and I'll answer some of the questions that were brought up during the study session, but this area has been designated for employment. The Air Park Area Plan, which has been around since 1998, identifies the site as being I-2. There is the commercial component at the corner, but you can see in that definition on the right what that light industrial Air Park Area Plan designation is. And so it's one of the few times that I can say I'm proposing a development that is 100% consistent with every guiding document that this city has. So with respect to one of the questions in terms of landscaping, and I think the chair had a comment about the particular about the buildings and the planting of the proposed acacia trees or another shade tree. We have no problem. There is the stipulation that talks about the upsize in the quantity of the box size and the tree height at planting. I believe that's stipulation number 11, I think, if I remember right. And I'm sure the chair will correct me where I'm wrong.
Number 10. But you're
Number
close.
10. I was
You're
close. I was close. But nevertheless, we're okay to agree to a similar stipulation for those types of trees when we look at it. We have no problem ensuring that those trees that are on kind of the blank spaces of the buildings be 12 feet at the time of planting. And so if that's a stipulation we need to add to it, we're more than happy to add that relative to those plantings. Because as I said, we've worked very close with staff on the architectural design of this development. Certainly contextually, you can kind of see what's around. We did take into account the fact that we're at the end of the runway, that we're adjacent from the city's solid waste facility. Obviously, the Ferguson development that you're familiar with that we worked on is under construction right now, and obviously the stuff at the southeast. So it's a little bit different case than others that may have occurred previously in the area in terms of its location relative to it. But specifically to the question and the comment of the land use, and I bring this slide up, and I know staff shared a similar slide in their presentation. But when we started down this process, we heard loud and clear, we don't want it to be distribution. And as we visited with staff about it, obviously you can see on that top the design of the development, how it had 2 crosstalks. I will tell you, even though that top site plan was designed that, it was never ever Core 5's intention to do and develop a distribution type development. If they wanted to do distribution, they would have gone to the west side, where it probably would have been a little quicker than the 2 years that we've been working on up to this point. But there never was any attention. Nevertheless, we understood that the perception of the cross docks led everyone to have a real concern about this becoming distribution. And you can see there at that first neighborhood meeting, we had 23 neighbors that showed up, in addition to 2 council members, seated council members that attended that hearing as well. And you can see the concerns there. Coming out of that, talking with staff, we felt it appropriate to change the design because we heard the concerns about the distribution, we heard the concerns about the cross docks, and have made a real effort to redesign this development to the one that's before you today. A few things that I will point out that as we've designed it, clearly this is not an industrial development where you have a single row of parking and then you've got large buildings and large truck docks. One of the things that we've done, we're targeting, and I'll get to a slide to show you exactly who we're targeting, but you can see that there is a substantial amount of parking that we're providing around this development, around the buildings along Canary Way and along Queen Creek Road. Warehousing, industrial uses in city are parked at 1 per 1,000. That's the ratio that we're looking at. Here, we are almost double that. We're a little bit shy of 2 spaces per 1,000 that we're parking. So we are targeting the manufacturers, the high types of business park users, certainly with Intel's announcement that they're dumping $20 billion into the area. Really shows us that there's a need for, and an opportunity for businesses that would support Intel to be able to co-locate here. There's lots of other high manufacturing types of developments that are in there. I mean, the reality is when we look at it from an economic perspective, there is a real demand, not for a distribution, but for the high-tech type jobs, the high-tech manufacturing with the higher employee counts. And because of that, we've designed it purposefully with an increased amount of parking. The amount of gingerbread that I'll say in terms of the design of the buildings, the architecture, the landscaping, everything that we've done leads us to, just talking economics, requires us to ask for a greater per square footage rent, considerably higher than what you would find that a distribution user would want. And so when we look at it, the design, the parking, the way that everything's been oriented, we believe that it doesn't lend itself to distribution. I've had the opportunity to work on lots of industrial developments here and elsewhere in the valley, and I don't know that I think it's potentially a little unfair to characterize dock doors on the back, whether they're the kind that you ramp up to or down or pull up to. I don't know that I'd necessarily characterize dock doors as a defining thing for something that's distribution. And certainly when we look at it from a use perspective, we believe that there's going to be a number of manufacturers that will come in here that will have a distribution type component. And the staff indicated during study session to restrict and say you can only have 10% of a distribution of a building be distribution, or 50% or 60%. We don't know, because at some point there will be a form of distribution that's going to take place with widgets coming in, being transformed into another product. And I understand the concern for an Amazon type distributor, and certainly they've got the space that they need there and another one. So we just don't think the design and the economics work at it. Again, speaking of the target market, you can see on there, and we've made this abundantly clear as we have gone through this process. This very same slide has presented in numerous one-on-one discussions. It's been presented to the neighbors at both meetings, and you saw on the slide that at the second neighborhood meeting with the redesign, and we made sure that we specifically reached out to the 23 individuals that came to our first meeting, that we let them know, hey, here's the redesign, and this is our target market, and you can see on there who we're looking at. These are not a target. Again, just to emphasize what it is that we're doing and what it is that we're not doing. We're not looking for those types of guys. We're not looking for that type of a thing. One of the things that was asked was kind of an economic impact, and this is from an economic impact analysis that you can see there, and I've snipped a few things that I'll point out. from the Rounds Consulting Group, and you can see the bit of draft on that. That report is going to be finalized in the next day or two, and that will be sent to Economic Development, as well as provided to anyone else that wants to read it in great detail. But I've kind of highlighted kind of one of the direct impacts that this development has at the outset, that we estimate that we're going to employ about 1,500 people, and then the average wage. But as we look at it once completed and what's it going to be from an ongoing operations, you can see on that slide there kind of what we're looking at. And I'll focus on the direct jobs, but I think it's important, the indirect as well. Again, with Intel announcing its $20 billion investment, I think Chandler realizes, and you all realizes, that that 20 billion is going to spurn additional development, additional people coming into the city, additional investments that can be directly attributed to that announcement by Intel. And that's where we get into the indirect jobs and the indirect benefits. So when we look at it, again, you can see those. And we've laboriously talked to the consulting firm that pulled this together to say, are you sure on these numbers? Because we don't want to flash something that's not true. That's not been that's not the way I've operated for the past 16 years coming before this group. And so we're confident in these numbers in terms of the output. So I think that addresses most of the comments I think that I heard at the study session. There might be one or two that I may have missed, but we're certainly appreciative of staff and the work that they've put in with us to ensure that it meets the high quality that's been requested of us and required. We've worked closely with them to ensure that the design of this, from a design standpoint, is able to minimize some of those concerns, and we feel that we've achieved that. I think, I'd like to believe that the neighbors are pleased with it by virtue of the fact that we went from 23 to 2, and I haven't looked over my shoulder to see if anyone walked in yet, and maybe there's someone that's going to speak, but we think we've done all the good things. So with that, happy to answer additional questions that you may have, but we'd request your recommendation for approval in accordance with staff.
So Mr. Ray, can you answer the slide you have up right now that has 93 million direct labor income? And you got a number of $850 million a year. So I'm kind of curious how you go from 93 million direct to 852. I'm just kind of curious.
That's a great question, Chair. I think when we start to look at that from 93 in direct labor, and we see that kind of summary, I think that 852, as you look at the note underneath, that's the total economic activity gained in the region as a result. So I think that 850 more speaks to some of those indirect costs, those indirect benefits when we look at it from earnings, wages, tax revenues, and look into that. That's where I believe that number comes from.
Okay, because you mentioned 1,500 jobs, and then this says 3,700 jobs. So for this site, though, you're talking about potentially 1,500 jobs. How many parking spaces are on this site?
In terms of, through the chair, in terms of the number of parking spaces, if you bear with me 1 minute, I will look that up to you. In terms of the total number of parking spaces, per code, if we were to park it per code.
Forget about code. If you're telling me there's 1,500 people working there, I'm curious how many parking spaces.
Yeah. So in terms of what's required, we're required to provide 946. Again, that's that 1 per 1,000, and we are providing a total of a little bit shy of 1,600 parking spaces.
I just want to make sure you got 1,500 employees. Unless they go park in the dump across the street, I don't think there's any place else to park. So,
Through the chair,
Commissioner,
is it fair to say, Mr. Ray, that if there's manufacturing involved, all 1,500 might not be on site at the same time also? Or might be a 24/7 type operation?
Through the chair, Commissioner, yes, that's fair to say.
Through the chair.
Commissioner Everly?
Yes, Brennan. Could the 852 million, just to be clear, could that be like a site GDP number? Is that what I'm hearing?
If you, through the chair, Commissioner, let me confirm with my client, but I believe that's correct. Through the chair, Commissioner, we believe that's correct. We will follow up with the consultant that prepared the report. He's unfortunately not here tonight. But we will follow up to confirm exactly what that is, and are happy to follow up with
Yes.
anyone in this group afterwards.
More curious than anything. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. Great number.
Through the chair.
Commissioner,
Brennan, I just want to commend the applicant. This looks like a great project. Thank you for working so closely with everyone at staff and making changes. There's just a few tweaks here and there that looks like you guys will be making. Landscaping looks good. It's just an exciting project and the impact it's going to have to, support our high-tech jobs.
Thank you.
so a couple other, any other questions from the
At the
commissioners?
chair.
Commissioner Kimball?
Brennan, thank you for your presentation. I have just a question. Can you walk me through the traffic pattern? I know that was a concern with the citizens. So the semis, I'm assuming, are coming off from 202 down McQueen, and your main interest is going to be on Queen Creek, and then are they gonna come off Queen Creek, turn right down to Arizona Avenue, or are they gonna go back left to McQueen?
Through the chair, Commissioner Kimball, just so I'm clear, you're talking about truck traffic?
Yes.
Regional truck traffic?
Yes.
Thank you. Let me pull up one slide really quick. So this was prepared by our traffic consultant, Don Cartier with CivTech. And I'll tell you, normally we're asked to only analyze the traffic patterns in and around our site. So immediately touching the four corners of our site, but we've expanded that out. But this will give you an idea of kind of the regional truck traffic that we estimate. Again, I think this commission is aware that people driving semi trucks, they're not a big fan of making left-hand turns. That's not to say that they won't, but most of the times we find that they're going to make right turns. And so as our traffic engineer has looked at this, and as this was submitted to the city, I think the city approved our traffic report, and this was a component of it, kind of identified where we expected the traffic to go.
Thank you.
Commissioner Roy?
Through the chair. And this is kind of a question for us and perhaps the city planning more than the applicant. But, on the one hand, we say we don't want any more server farms because there's no jobs or very few jobs. Here potentially is a project that could bring $852 million annually to the area. So what are we looking for? No jobs or lots of jobs? And I think you're in a good corridor there where the traffic can hold, and especially after you've met with the neighbors and you've gone from 23 down to very minimal number of people who don't want to see this. It's a good spot. I like the project. So maybe somebody could answer directionally for me, what this commission and city planning has in mind as far as
So I will.
employment.
So I think that the challenge you have as the land is diminished, and we're down to a few sites right now, that you really want as a city to make sure that the land use is compatible and drives the greatest economic development. I think to Mr. Ray's point, having warehouse distribution is great along the I-10 corridor out in, no offense to Avondale or Goodyear or whatever, or even West Chandler and along Kyrene and along the 202. But I think that's the challenge of both commission and council, to make sure that our last remaining land is best utilized, because once it's gone, it's gone. You spend $100 million building these buildings, you're not going to tear them down for a long time, hopefully for many, many, many years. So I think that's one of the challenges, is just make sure that, to Mr. Ray's point, with Intel coming in and some of the other things, you want to make sure that the building design, and I do have a question for Mr. Ray, that, you talked to me several times about this. I'm just kind of get on the record a little bit, that the user you're looking for is a higher rent thing. Explain to me, your building, the architecture part of the building, what drives this more so to get a higher rent than just, throwing a few extra trees on and breaking up the mass on the buildings and such? What's going to drive those rents?
Sure. Through the chair, and if I needed to, I could get Bill Hunsaker, who is a broker. He's with JLL, national firm, and if I mess up and we need to get Bill up here to explain a little bit more what goes into it, more than happy to do that. But with respect to when we look at this, there are a number of factors that go into the square footage rent, the tenant rent. And certainly the land cost is one of those components. Then you start to layer in construction cost, site development cost, and everything that's associated with that. And certainly the design of the buildings, that does factor in. I know it may not seem like it because Chandler has been good at pushing the envelope. I can assure you that when we started this process a few years ago, our vision of what the building should look like versus what is before you today is different. And I've had lots of discussions with staff because, to the chair's point, we've heard the concern from the beginning. And I'm not going to stand up here and say we haven't heard the concern about distribution or the scarcity of land or ensuring that we get a quality development here. We've heard that the entire way, and our steps along the way have led to that. So when you look at all of that factor into it, again, without locking myself in legally, when we're talking a square footage per rent types of things, we're looking at in terms of what you might find that the distributive type users, again, the West Side users, they're looking to pay anywhere from 40 to 45 cents a square foot on a triple net lease. And then in terms of TI, because as you well know, a lot of tenants, when they come in, they want a TI allowance too. And so for the landlord to pony up for those tenant improvements. And so again, that is in the $8 to $10 square foot. So on the distribution users, 40 to 45 cents a square foot with an 8 to 10 foot square foot TIA. What we're asking for, and we've communicated this recently with economic development, because economic development approached this and said, hey, we've got a potential user that's looking for this type of a building. In particular, we think building C or building B, and provided to them the information. And I'll share with you what we provided to Micah Miranda in terms of what is being asked is 65 cents to 72 cents. And that in part depends on the building size. And then we're looking at a tenant improvement allowance of anywhere from 14 to 20 bucks a square foot. So double the tenant improvement allowance, substantially more in terms of the square footage. The other thing that we look at when we look at this type of a development is the power requirements. And we, although I can't say chapter and verse of what power is, I know we're planning power-wise to get the big manufacturers in here. And that's the way we're looking at it, and that's the way we're designing it. So again, when we look into it in terms of the square footage and the cost, there's lots of things that factor into that.
So you bring up an interesting point, because I know that there's other projects around town that have needed significant extra power. Where on this site are you talking about doing like a building? I know I've seen it around several of our projects around town where there's an extra building having to be built to handle the power. So when you talk about power needs, where would you put that on the site if you have that significant power needs for manufacturing?
Through the chair, unlike what you might typically see for, say, a data center or something like that, where they do have that separate standalone power, we don't believe that, at least as I understand the power requirements that we're talking about, that they would require a separate building. And I can grab those details really quick. I'm trying to scan and listen at the same time in terms of emails, because I know that we swapped emails today in terms of power and stuff like that. But we believe that there is existing infrastructure around there, and I can confirm this and follow back up if we need to, that there is that capacity that exists from a power standpoint in the area to allow us to provide the necessary power. We're not just talking a regular 12 volt kind of plug-in kind of stuff that we're all used to.
And the reason I asked that, I know on Chandler Corporate Center, there's 2 buildings there that had to build accessory buildings on for their power needs. One was a manufacturer, one wasn't. But that's kind of the question, why that. And another question on the concern about distribution, I know I was looking at like building F, for example, or even building C. There's a lot of what I call recessed doors, 3-4 feet, to be able to handle more distribution. If you get a user that comes in and are you building these spec, or are you building to a user?
Chairman, so phase one is the one that will be built first, and those are planned to be spec builders. I mean, if we get tenants along the way, obviously we'll build to that, and that's part of the reason that as we look at the design of this, trying to anticipate market needs and to get those people that want it. We, you know, each tenant's going to come in with their various requirements, and some of them might require dock bays on the back, and some might require less. Part of it is just not knowing as we go through this way, but trying to give enough flexibility to allow us to meet the tenant's demands as they come in.
So question for you then, in terms of that, I mean, when I looked at it, it looks like most of them are small truck recess kinds of things. Would it be possible that you would come back in and say, I need, 15 or 20 dock high, major semi trucks come, dock doors? Or what you're showing on this plan of being basically, what I call, I don't want to use the word UPS trucks, but that kind of distribution truck. Would you come back and or I guess I ask a question of staff, David or Christine, would they have to come back in based on the plan, and maybe you could throw it up, if they came back to the side and say, hey, we need, 20 full recess, grocery type distribution, docks, would they have to come back?
Mr. Chairman, is your question if they want to add more, or?
No, well, if you look at the plan right now, what is in the booklet, it looks like there's a lot of doors, but they're only, I want to say, Brennan can clarify, 4 feet, which not semi trucks. They're basically smaller, cargo vans, things like that. Would they have to come back if they decided that they found a user, and I'm not saying they're going to do it or not, but they find a user that needs all major recessed wells to be heavy duty distribution as part of their component? Would they have to come back for that based on the plan that was presented?
I see. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for that question. Currently, as it's proposed, there's enough flexibility for staff to approve that administratively. There's enough wiggle room for staff to review minor changes that are still in substantial conformance with the intent of the development.
Okay, so again, if right now the 4-foot doors are really just cargo vans, things like that, that's incidental distribution. It's more the, company picking up stuff, things like that. But if they decided they found a user and they came back to you guys and said, hey, we got this heavy duty user that needs this whole thing to be dock high, 8 feet, whatever the number is, with big semis coming in there, would that be something that could be approved on this, or would that be something that would have to come back?
It would be something that could be approved administratively through staff.
Okay. I guess that's one of my concerns. I mean, I hear what everybody's saying. I'd love to hear from the broker, Brennan, too, in terms of what the guys you're looking for. I just want to make sure that that's all. I'm just asking.
To the chair, I want to be very clear on something from my own personal view. You can't talk manufacturing without having distribution. You can't make product without having components shipped in, which require ability to receive. You can't produce something that's manufactured to be sold that's not going to leave the door. So there's an implied element that has to be distribution here. What we're not looking for is massive distribution centers, whether it be food or whether it be Amazon or UPS or anything else. The way this is designed, I don't see that happening. And I just think we're putting this applicant through the ringer for good questions, but we're talking economic development. We've never, in 3 years I've been up here, put anybody else through economic development questions and asked about how do they come up with a $850 million.
Well, actually, I've been doing this a long time, and there have been times we do economic development depending on the project. I'm asking the questions so when it gets to council, it's real clean, because I know there's been some questions about in terms of distribution. It started out, with the cross docks and things like that. That's why I'm asking the questions to staff, so that it's clarified now, not to worry about it down the road. So, I mean, I'm hoping that what's going to end up being is really high quality manufacturing. I don't disagree. There's certain things come in and out. But there's a difference between that and a heavy duty warehouse distribution, i.e., let's say a grocery or something like that, which wouldn't be here because of the nature where it's at. It's not near the freeway. So,
But I'd remind the chair that we're not the Economic Development Advisory Board. We are the Planning and Zoning Commission,
I
which
understand that.
puts us with a defined use. And when we start getting into a lot of economic development questions, I question whether that's the
Okay,
appropriate
well,
use of our time.
Commissioner, our job on this commission is to look for best uses and the best land use that goes into a project. That's part of it. And economic development falls into that a little bit, but it's still the best land use for any project that we approve. That's what our job is, land use. Our job is architectural. Those are the kinds of the questions. That's why I'm asking the questions now. So I think the project's a really good project. I just, I'm asking those questions so that it's clarified. So 5-6 years now down the road, nobody can say, well, back when. That's all. That's why I'm asking the
Nobody's sitting up here, Chairman can tell us what 5 or 6 years looks like economically.
Okay. So I do want to hear from your broker, but I also, one other question on the tree thing we talked about. I know one of the other commissioners I talked to earlier, are you talking about on those big walls doing one big tree? I mean, you talked about acacia trees, and I don't know how fast they're going to grow or not, but what's your thoughts on that in terms of 12 feet on planting is not a big, unless it's a fast growing tree.
Through the chair, members of the commission, certainly thank you. In terms of why we picked the shoestring acacia, that is because it is a fast growing tree. And I wish Mr. Andy Barron, former commissioner, was here because he would very quickly chime in and express his beliefs when it comes to landscaping.
Okay.
But no, in terms of that, again, 12 feet, we picked the acacia because it was a faster growing tree.
I mean, I know how fast live oaks grow. I know how mesquites grow, things like that.
Sisus?
Acacias, no sisus. You guys wouldn't want sisus because they would go right under your building and crack your foundation. So you don't want that anyway. So you want guys shaking your head yes, because that would be really bad.
Yeah.
So, okay. I'd love to hear from you, in terms of that, and then we can move on.
Good evening. My name is Bill Honsaker. I am with JLL, otherwise known as Jones Lang LaSalle. My office address is 3131 East Camelback Road in Phoenix. I've been working on the project with the team for quite a while as well. I certainly understand the concerns that have been raised and do appreciate it. I know there have been several buildings that have been referenced. FedEx, for example, Amazon, UPS. If you were to take a look at those buildings, I actually sold the Covance building, which is now Insight. So done a lot of work in Chandler.
And thank you for doing that, by the way.
You bet. It's turned out quite well. If you look at the building that ended up to the south, which is the FedEx building, and you look at that plan and design, it looks nothing like the buildings you're seeing on this plan. If you were to go to the west side and you looked at UPS's facility at basically Indian School and the Loop 303, it's a massive building, dock doors on both sides. If you look at the Amazon building just down and across the street, it's a very different design. It's a box they wanted, parking for vans, things all over the place, dock doors on both sides. It's a very unique design. We were very deliberate in how we laid this project out. Again, as it was shared, there were buildings that were designed that very much looked more like a traditional distribution building. And what we did is we heard the community, we heard the commission. We changed the design to be single side loaded, all of the loading on the interior, so that from the exterior, whether it be McQueen or Queen Creek, it was aesthetically pleasing. We took the parking ratio, as Brendan shared earlier, and we increased it. And the reason being, the East Valley traditionally, because of its, because of ASU's presence, because of Intel, because of Motorola, and that was here. By the way, I sold the Motorola facility, which is now Continuum. And so we are really trying to be mindful and cognizant of not only what you're looking for from an economic development perspective, but also the community and the citizens. And we heard it, and we know that there were concerns from other developments in the area, And we don't want to be that project. We want something much more higher image. Brendan shared a slide with a number of the types of users that are out there. I am working with Stryker Corporation right now, which again is looking to land likely in Chandler. It's a manufacturer, it's a medical device manufacturer, and they're going in a building very similar to what we're proposing here. So again, hopefully I've given you a little bit more insight to, to the mindset as far as types of users that we'd be looking for, but more importantly, the buildings that I think you're really concerned about, that is not what we are presenting here.
Okay.
I'm happy to answer any specific questions.
Any questions? I do appreciate that. That actually gives a good clarification of what is happening. I'm glad you came up to talk. So, okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm just here to answer any more questions.
Any further questions for Mr. Ray? Okay, you're good. Anybody, I don't have any speaker cards, although Mr. Ray was nervous 2 or 3 people were going to sneak in.
I will say that all of these people are here for us.
Okay. They don't want to speak on your behalf?
I'm sure many of them would like to, but they won't be afforded the opportunity.
Okay. Ooh, okay. All right. Anybody else in the audience who'd like to talk on this project? Okay, I'm going to close the floor. I do appreciate Mr. Ray and the team putting this together, and getting to hear from your broker was super important to me to hear some of those kinds of conversations, which is really good. So anyway, any other further comments from the commission? If not, I will entertain a motion.
I'd like to make a motion.
Okay.
To approve the project, Schrader Farm Business Park, with the added stipulations.
Okay. I got a motion on the floor. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Kimball seconds. Okay. Any further discussion? Okay. I wish you guys, I know this is a little bit of a long process, but I think it's important when you're having a project like this come forward that those questions are asked, whether people feel they're right or wrong or whatever. I think as our land goes away, it's super important that the best thing is brought for our city. So, okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you guys, appreciate it.
Thank
Good
you.
luck with your project.
Thank you.
Okay. Get off of this screen. You brought a lot of friends, Brennan. I don't know if they were your friends or your bodyguards or what, so I guess. Okay, briefing items. Staff, any briefing items tonight? Okay. Members' comments. Just one comment from me, 2 comments from me. One, it's Father's Day this Sunday, so to all the fathers up here on the dais and out there, so wish you a happy Father's Day. Hopefully it'll be a great day. And the other thing is it's extremely hot out there. Be really careful, make sure you hydrate. If you see people out there in need, we do have a lot of people out there in need. Buying cases of water and things like that are great ways to help. We have a lot of great food banks and facilities in our city that could really use the help right now and stuff as well. So next regular meeting will be held on July 21st. There is no meeting on July 7th. And with that, meeting adjourned.